you've had marketing and communications added.
That
Marketing.
happened last year.
Right, to your job title. So where it used to be called public communications, or public relations, I'm sorry. It's now marketing communications. So did all those silos of corporate functions, have they not necessarily disappeared, but are they overlapping more now? Does it give you, what does this mean to the classic idea of what public relations is with what you do now?
Yeah. Well, communications, the story that I've been telling resulted in a very, very strong communications function by Lou's retirement, 2001 or so. I succeeded David as head of communications, reported to Lou for not a very long period because he was getting ready to leave as well. And here comes Sam Palmisano, my new CEO, and I was head of the function since 2002. Communications was and is at IBM very strong. In fact, our biggest problem is that we can't hang on to everybody because they get recruited, to other companies, and we're very proud of that, right? But we really went from being, the gang that couldn't shoot straight to, I think, a very effective team. Even before the marketing thing happened, we knew though that so heading into the new century, things were changing in the world, and we got started to sort of evolve ourselves beyond even how strong we became. What do I mean by that? Well, even before the world now uses terms like social media, we knew that the internet was going to change the way people got information and interacted. We didn't have the right vocabulary down, but we knew that it wouldn't be enough to have relationships with the 27 key reporters that we knew, right? Broadcast and print and so forth. So we'd better get ourselves retooled to start to reach other kinds of people. And we started to do that. So when the internet came along, and then bloggers came along, and then podcasting came along, and now social media, by the way, that was very controversial, especially for the media relations people, because they believe that what could possibly, the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Forbes, Fortune will always be the primary influencers in the world, in our world. Well, look what's happened. Business Week is up for sale today for $1. Not an issue of the magazine, the whole company, because McGraw-Hill, it's just a trouble. And every newspaper's circulation is declining, and we all know that today. I'm very proud of the fact that years ago we got started to affect a cultural change within communications to get ready to embrace new ways of doing things. I believe that the primary reason why my boss, Sam Palmisano, put marketing together with communications and asked me to lead the combined entity a year ago was because we had consistently brought to him new ideas and new ways of doing things. And he was not seeing that from the marketing profession, which is by any measure 10 times the size of the communications organization. So that happened last year. And as I said, it's being driven mostly by the external changes in the world. You need to coordinate across everything today, advertising, sales promotion, websites, press, analysts, and the like. But you also need to put the inside of the company together with the outside, the culture and the brand. By and large, for marketing professionals, internal considerations is a blind spot. They are focused on the marketplace, on customers present and future, on competitors, and on the product and service we're trying to get them, people to buy. You talk to them about, the culture of the company or the internal audience. They might say the internal audience, meaning we want employees to be brand ambassadors. When we talk about the culture having to be the underpinning of our brand, it's not interesting to them. But that's no longer inseparable in this new world that we're moving into. Because every employee can blog, every employee can talk about what they're doing, and the world now knows how corporations behave and treat their people and what kind of citizens they are and what their executives are paid, and they factor those things into considerations about the product and services that they buy. So for all those reasons, it makes sense, I think, to put these things together.
You were quoted by Matt Gonring in the Journal of Business Strategy.
Yeah.
And you referred to the strong relationship between brand strength and performance, and then the customer loyalty and employee engagement.
Right.
And you created the employee engagement program. Talk a little bit about formally, how did the employees respond? Where is it now?
So Gerstner believes that the calcification of IBM's culture got the company into trouble, and that of all the things he did and led, changing IBM's culture is what led us out of the woods. And yes, we did help him with that. I believe that even today, most internal communications arms of PR functions or communications functions really do, what do they really do? They do corporate journalism. They create messages for the employees to consume. And in that regard, they really shouldn't use terms like employee engagement or culture change or organizational transformation. It's treating the employees as an audience of message from management. And that is necessary, but it's not sufficient. I mean, obviously if the company is saying we're changing your dental benefits, you need to know that. If we're reorganizing the company, you need to know that. If we're about to launch a new product, you should know that. Fine. We need capability to do that. What we did, though, and Gerstner was so insistent that we do this, he says, well, I don't want you just to inform employees about what we need to become. You got to help employees become that. I'll give you an example. Well, how? One thing, he says, we're not a team. We're not collaborative across our structures, the divisions of the company. And yet our business model promises integrated solutions for the customer. So yes, you're doing a good job communicating that imperative, but you got to come up with ways for the employees to actually collaborate. Well, I thought to myself, this is back in the 90s, you're asking the wrong department. We're the communications department. We're not the change the way people work department. Lou's like, try, come up with some ideas. And we did, under that kind of pressure and invitation. So part of employee engagement was to engage the employees, not just communicate with them. We have an intranet. A lot of companies have intranet. Every company has an intranet. Most companies, even today, use their intranets to send messages. Well, starting around 1998, we said, 98% of employees use the intranet every day to consume information. With a little bit of work, we can turn this into a collaboration platform. So employees can, this is before Facebook by many, many years, employees could actually create content, share it with each other, find each other, get answers to questions without management having to answer them, help one another, and so forth. Which today is so obvious, but back then it was, wait, it's not built to do that. Well, what do you mean it's not built to do that? I'm thinking of my patent now. It's not built to do that. The intranet is 3 years old. We don't even know what it can do. So we evolved into these, the intranet became a collaborative platform for us. Lou and now Sam uses it, but it's not just them anymore. All the employees use it horizontally with each other. And the communications department pioneered that with us. So employee engagement was, we went from communicating to employees to enabling employees to work in new ways. And I think that was a big evolution in so-called internal communications for us.
You were co-chair of the team that put together the Authentic Enterprise. Could you talk a bit about it and the kind of impact that it's having?
Sure. So 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago, Roger Bolton was president of the Page Society. And one of the primary missions of the Page Society is to advance the policy role of the Chief Communications Officer. So Roger said, well, if that's the case, then what's the future of the Chief Communications Officer? We should have a team go off and try to answer that question. Valerie DeMaria, who was at Motorola at the time as CCO, and I co-chaired that. We had 19 team members, CCOs and agency people, great team, and we sort of dove into this question. Well, one of the things we quickly found out was, in order to answer the question that what is the future of the CCO, we had to answer what is the future of the CEO. So we had a firm go off and interview. It turned out to be a little over 30 CEOs. And before they could answer the question about the future of the CCO, they wanted to talk the future of business. What was on their mind? This is now, about 2.5, 3 years ago. They listed several forces of change, pretty obvious today. One is the digital network revolution. And from a CEO's standpoint, they said it used to be just the press, either playing offense, like let's get our word out, but then also defense. We just used to have to worry about the press. But now somebody over here we've never heard of has this powerful megaphone called the internet. They're on it for like nothing, and people are actually paying attention to them. How are we going to respond to this new world? So the diffusion of media, mostly because of the digital commons emerging, was one. Second was expectations of corporations are changing. Perhaps there was a day when a corporation was expected to produce good product, make money, and not break the law. But now the CEO is saying, I got to worry about the environment, I got to worry about my supply chain, I got to worry about how I treat my people, I've got to worry about all these things. That coupled with the prior concern, the CEO is saying, all these stakeholders are exerting influence on us, but by the way, maybe we should take advantage of that, but I don't know how to do that. The third was globalization. About the same time we were doing this work, Tom Friedman's book, The World is Flat, came out. And rather than being a screed about jobs moving to India, it was a very thoughtful, it changed the dialogue, or at least in the United States, that globalization is going to have profound implications, good and bad, and we better figure this one out. So the CEOs were citing those three drivers of change. We then asked the CEOs, and then we subsequently did a lot of thinking about this. So what are the implications of all of this to the CCO who reports to you? And the CEOs, by and large, said, well, one, we need somebody to figure out how to have relationships across multiple stakeholders. Today, we manage the government here, the press over here, universities there, employees over here, customers differently. But they're all talking to each other now on the net. They all have the same knowledge, so we can't segment them and segment messages. They all know the same thing. How do we get hold of this thing and use it to our advantage? CCOs could help. Secondly, they said, help us figure out this new world of digital, gain mastery of it. Someone's going to. CCO could take a stab at it. Third, and this was wonderful to hear, values will be very, very important again. And I need help to define values or reaffirm them and then get everyone to live them. Why? Because of this incredibly transparent world that we're in, the only way that we can be sure that whatever the world sees, mostly through our people, they're going to like what they see. And I can't do that unless everybody actually is living the values that we espouse. And in some cases, we need help even defining them. Well, to me, so we wrote all that up in the paper and published it. We call it the authentic enterprise deliberately. And I just gave a little talk across the street here, and I talked about authenticity, because I think it's been misunderstood. You asked what has been the reaction. It's been a very good reaction. There are some recommendations in the paper, somewhat controversial, which is good. But one thing that I've observed is that people have equated authenticity with ethics. And I said to them yesterday in this little talk, I said, we could have called the paper, we could have written a paper called the ethical enterprise, the socially responsible enterprise, the virtuous enterprise, the good enterprise, the unindicted enterprise, but we didn't. We call it the authentic enterprise. Why? Because every company should be ethical, every company should not break the law, every company should do the right thing. But great companies not only do all of those, which I believe are table stakes, But great companies are also unique in some way. Another way of saying it is not every company values the same thing. So, like what? Well, we value innovation. At least we say we do. Well, and an insurance company or a bank might say, we don't value innovation because we value risk mitigation, right? Another company might say, we value team play in our culture. Other companies might say, we value individual achievement. Those are perfectly good differences, but they also make for unique companies. So authenticity isn't about doing good things, it's about being clear about what you want to be distinctly in the world, and then actually translating those words into action in the behavior of the company. So I think that the authentic enterprise gets talked up a lot if it does, because it's touched a nerve about lack of trust in corporations, which is very much true given what we've been through in the past 10 years here. It also speaks to the change that's required for us to navigate and capitalize on the new digital commons, which is very controversial. In some ways it means loss of control. We think about it, I mean, we write the speeches, we write talking points, we monitor interviews, we talk to reporters. No one else is authorized to talk to the press. The authorized spokesperson used to mean something. Well, the declining circulation of newspapers and the declining effect of primetime television, we go with it. If people aren't reading just Business Week, Forbes, Fortune, the New York Times, and so forth, and they're getting more information and influence from other places, we better map ourselves to that too. But it also means that we can't control what a blogger writes or thinks, and we one day will not be able to control, in our case, 400,000 employees all expressing a point of view to the world. That gets back to values. So a lot of work comes back to what do we value, in our case at IBM, and then what are the programs and operations that we have to put in place to ensure that employees are supported as we live what we espouse, what we aspire to be. I do think that this represents an expansion of the CCO's role and an expansion of public relations, but we do have to adopt and adapt new ways of doing things. And I think that a lot of companies are well on their way to doing that.
For which of your accomplishments are you most proud?
Well, I can't lay claim to the great team that exists at IBM in communications, because I think that was, as I've recounted, was started by my predecessor, and I only furthered that work. My career has been marked mostly by the near death of IBM and our coming out of it. So I think I'm most proud of the work that I did in partnership with Lou Gerstner and others in changing our culture. And it wasn't one thing alone. It was many, many things to change the attitude and behavior of a population of people. And I am proud of that. Part of that was the power of having, in our case, an IBM articulate a strong point of view to the outside world. So, which is another way of saying, if you say we want to be a leader, well then, by definition, you have to be leading people or clients or employees somewhere, so you better have a good agenda or a good vision or a plan to lead them somewhere. So for us, I will cite two things very quickly that I contributed to. One was the development of, in the 90s, a strategy called e-business, which we have subsequently galvanized the entire company around and took out to the world. And it had an enormous effect on employee, not just morale, but direction. More recently, we have a strategy called Smarter Planet, which has a lot to do with where we think technology is going today. What the two have in common, now that I sort of think about it, is they are both forward-looking platforms which simultaneously allow IBM to talk about where the world is going, where business is going, where technology is going, and then finally IBM and our products and services. But those kinds of agendas and platforms are very, very powerful because they very clearly help articulate a point of view. And people don't have to agree with it, but they can rally around it. They're very hard to build because they have to be true and they have to be multidimensional. And I guess I have had a role in both, in the 90s, the development of e-business, and right now, the development of what we call Smarter Planet. And because in essence, we've delivered to the corporation not just a campaign, but strategies. And I'm proud of that.
Do you think that's why now the brand IBM is so trustworthy, and compared to how it was maybe in the 90s and,
Right.
and how it is not now? Is it the result of all the work from the employees up?
Yeah, we have the data on it, and the reason why IBM's brand is respected and trusted, as you say, is because of our transformation. Not just once, but the ability of a company to reinvent itself. We'll be 100 years old in 2 years. And unlike a company that's 100 years old that pulls oil out of the ground or makes cars or does banking, cars by and large are still four-wheeled internal combustion engine things, right? I mean, Henry Ford would come back and recognize the basics of a car. J.P. Morgan would come back and recognize what, he may not approve, but he would recognize what a bank is supposed to do. And an oil company, John Rockefeller would recognize an oil company for sure, largely unchanged. But Tom Watson Sr. would not recognize what we produce. I would like him to say, I absolutely recognize the IBM company, and it's the same company, because he put into motion a company that was never defined by the products we made. And I think that's hard to do. We nearly died because once we forgot how to do that. But I think one of the reasons why we're trusted today and admired is the ability to keep ahead of changing times. And our role in that, communications, is not just to sort of message that, although it's a big part of our work. It's to help identify those forces of change and then to mobilize the business to take advantage of them. I will always be haunted by the collapse of the company. And I have much more appreciation for my parents, who were children of the Depression, about, they don't believe in credit cards, they believe in cash. And I'm like, the world's changed, Mom, Dad, you can trust those things. They still remember what it was like as a kid, and they can't help themselves, right? I can't help myself. I always think that something's going to come along to kill IBM. It doesn't matter if we're very successful again, and therefore, I tend to try to keep an eye out on trends and their implications. Authentic enterprise being, an example of that for our profession. So, being on the leading edge of change and not victims of change, and not being victims of our own inaction, I think is an important lesson of my career, and I didn't set out to learn that one.
Well, I want to thank you
Sure.
for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you
really
for
appreciate it. It's
giving
been-
me the opportunity to talk here about
It's
it.
been very interesting.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you very much.